I would suggest that people pay attention to our elections. We don't have to have it this way. We can put pressure on the legislature to clean things up. It's in the national news right now. Elon Musk is tweeting about the problems with mail-in voting. We know that there are a lot of problems for mail-in voting and potential problems. So put pressure on your legislatures to get a cleaner system. That would go a long way too.
Well, baby. What do you think?
I think Casey actually posted this on Twitter. I think it was today, and I think it's a good way to just sum everything up that we spoke about today. So,
Casey Gale.
Casey Gale, yeah. Shout out to Casey. He's also a big part of the Lyman campaign and a social media warrior. So I'll just reiterate what he said. Is there more corruption in Utah's 24 gubernatorial primary than there was in Arizona's 22 gubernatorial general election with Kari Lake, who, side note, Deidre is best friends with Katie Hobbs. So coincidence, who knows?
Interesting.
So Deidre Henderson and Spencer Cox oversaw their own election. Here's part of the case. When you oversee your own election, when you oversee your running mates' signatures, when you refuse to release the cast vote records, when you deny grammar requests, when clerks refuse to send out cure reports, when you refuse to release the names of those signing a candidate nomination petition, when you employ those on the board of canvassers, when you appoint the judges, when the media runs interference. It's a recipe for unchecked and unbalanced tyranny.
Well said, Alexia and Casey. We are in a time when the Constitution is hanging by a thread. You look nationally what's going on. Our country has been taken over at the highest levels, the FBI, the DOJ. They've replaced the leadership in the military with woke, people who are loyal to this new party that's running. New party, new regime, whatever you want to call it. They've destroyed our military. They've destroyed our dollar. They turned off our ability to be energy dependent. Our country is on the fringe, on the literally hanging by a thread. You've got certain states standing up and fighting. Florida, South Dakota, Kristi Noem, Arkansas. You have certain governors who are pushing back against the machine. Meanwhile, in Utah, you have Governor Cox. Saying that we're not like other Republicans, that, we are the Romney, we are the Curtis, we are the, look what is happening to our state. Look at our reps. And, this should terrify people because, the whole message is, we can do so little about DC, but you have so much power over your backyard. And if there's one fight that matters right now, it is this, because if we cannot control our ability to elect if we don't have control of our elections, what do we have? We're a tyranny. And when we have a governor who oversees his own elections, when you go through everything we just talked about, you get it. You've seen this. So again, this is the establishment versus the people. This is the elite media. Like everywhere in the world, CNN and Fox, it is the same thing in Utah. You have KSL and Deseret News and the Trib all pushing a narrative. Versus the regular people like us, versus, the people. Nobody's coming to save us. No one's coming to save you. If we are going to get this country back, it starts with getting our state back, and that starts with you standing up and fighting this fight. And there is nothing that tyranny fears more than the spoken truth. That is why the World Economic Forum, I'll put it again in the article here. I'm going to put it here again. I put it in their last video because you need to be aware. The biggest threat that they say that we have in this world ahead of war, and we are on the verge of World War III, ahead of economic disaster, which we are on the verge of that. The biggest threat, according to these tyrants, is misinformation. They fear you. They fear this. They can control KSL. They cannot control this. They cannot control you. Your kid's future depends on you standing up and talking to your neighbors, having the uncomfortable conversations. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable. Share the post and say, hey, what do you think of this? You don't even have to say your opinion. Do you think this is as validity? Do you think Cox should be in charge of elections? Ask the question. Learn to be tactful. You don't have to go and be a bulldog and come across, like a crazy conspiracy. Just say, what do you think about this? Do you think there's anything funny here? Get this information out, because that is how we win. Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, one man who tells the truth can bring down a tyranny. We have a tyranny growing in our backyard, and it is your responsibility. It's my responsibility. It is our responsibility to stand up and fight it. They fear us. They'll turn off our stations. We will keep fighting, and we need you to do the same. So And what's up, Utah? Welcome back to We Are the People Radio. This is your host, Jason Preston. And my baby. How you doing, beautiful? Sometimes you got to mix it up. How you doing?
Okay.
Just okay?
Yeah. It's a weird season for Utah right now.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be talking today about the post-elections. There have been a lot of people have questions. What's going on with Phil Lyman's campaign? And, the reality is, Utah has done something. We've talked about this in the past. It would be very weird, and not very weird, it'd be very unconstitutional if as America, we said, you know what, we're going to give the control of our elections to the president, and we're going to let the president oversee his own elections. Most states have a Secretary of State who oversees elections. But in Utah, we said, you know what? Well, we have a governor. We have a governor back in the day who said, you know what? We're going to take that power from the people so they can't elect who oversees the governor. And we're going to make it an appointed position by the governor, i.e. a lieutenant governor. That's why we have a lieutenant governor. And the lieutenant governor oversees the elections. So obviously that's a massive red flag. So when Cox was running for governor 4 years ago, he was actually overseeing his own elections.
As lieutenant governor.
This year, we're like, hey, this is the problem. This is the problem. This is the problem. Everyone in Utah's like, oh, I don't see any problem. Well, Governor Cox and Deidre were overseeing, again, their own elections as Phil Lyman is running against them. So the question is this. Was that a problem? Was there issues? Was there any conflict of interest, or has this been all above board and is there nothing to worry about? Are people like us just, overly concerned and we should just trust our leadership and we should trust the governor and trust that these are honest men that we should never have to worry about accountability?
Or as we're seeing online, crazy conspiracy theorists, MAGA, extreme far right. I mean, it's the same buzzwords that we heard in the 2020 election.
Yeah. So we have who I believe should have been our lieutenant governor with us today. Natalie Clausen, how are you?
Thank you. Good to be with you guys.
Oh, it's always good to be with you.
We were pretty pumped when Phil announced he was lieutenant governor.
Yeah, it's great. He's incredible. I was really excited to get a run with him. He's really, a champion of free speech and help the individual rights. And yeah, he's a great person. So I was really happy to join the ticket with him.
Well, there's nobody I would have trusted more to oversee our elections if it would have actually stayed in the capacity of the lieutenant governor. Although one of the things Phil always said since the beginning of his campaign was one of the initiatives and priorities of his campaign was to establish a Secretary of State.
Right.
So it would have been nice to see that transition, but no one else I'd trust in this state more than you.
Well, thank you. It's been a big issue for both of us, for both me and Phil. We both worked through different capacities on trying to clean up our election system. So we know what the problems are, and we know how important it is to separate that responsibility away from the governor's office.
So you actually were involved with, there's some terrible election groups in this state like Count My Vote, but you were actually part of one of the better initiatives to actually secure our elections. Do you want to just briefly tell people what you were involved with back then?
So a couple of years ago, it was 2022, we ran an initiative called Secure Vote Utah. So our election code is really complicated. It's about 400 pages if you print it all out. And because it's been written at different times, it's complicated. So we went through the election code and we narrowed it down and really cleaned it up so that it could be a system that we could trust. And we put it out to the public as an initiative, and if we had enough support, we could put it on the ballot to have people vote for it. And the response was overwhelming. People have seen so many problems with the elections, and they have their own concerns, and so they were really excited to sign on to this. So we saw that there was a lot of support for that.
So you have a lot of expertise when it comes to understanding elections, the nuances of elections, the code of elections, and the way it should proper functionally.
Yeah, I've been looking at it closely for a while. And then Phil Lyman has done a lot on his part as a representative, that he's proposed several different elections bills that really would make a difference in Utah. And so this has been an important issue for him for a long time, something that he's willing to stand out on.
I think one of the things that's been frustrating is how he's been shut down. Him and Steve Christiansen, the only two reps that are willing to really put their neck on the line and ask that we clean up our elections. They were continually shut down and got nowhere. I mean, that's one of my things I'm frustrated about. But so let's go ahead and let's jump into this. To our viewers, thank you for your support. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing. One of the things you're going to notice if you happen to be driving down past the point in the mountain, we finally got our billboard up.
Oh, awesome.
So, we are absolutely serious about taking on, KSL. Utah needs to have
real conservative media.
Yes, unfiltered, not censored. We're tired of KSL. They won't talk about this stuff. Deseret News won't talk about these issues. They run cover for Cox, and we are fed up with them. So thank you to our people who are helping us, fund this. We've got that first billboard out. We're driving this hard. We're going to push it hard. So you can help. Go to make sure you're subscribed on our website. Obviously follow our channels. So subscribe. That way we can get you a newsletter. The other thing, if you want to buy shirts or donate, we would very much appreciate it. If you are a small business or a business and want to help fund what we're doing, send us an email at info@wearethepeople.org. We are trying to raise money. We want to, we are dead serious about taking on KSL, and we're getting ready to do some very exciting things. So with that being said, let's rock and roll.
So why don't you just run us briefly through, so primary was now, 2 weeks ago?
June 25th, right?
June 25th. So we were all together primary night watching the elections roll in. For anyone that missed it, it was a pretty small, relatively margin between Cox and Lyman. But within 20 minutes of the polls closing, you already have the Associated Press calling the race for Cox, for Curtis, 20 minutes after polls close. I mean, that's got to be a record of how quick they are to make these calls.
Well, it was incredible. Yeah, Phil said it was like we felt like we were in the first quarter still, and they're already calling the game. And I didn't even know. I was talking to people for a long time, didn't know that they had called it, that Cox has done his victory speech and everything like that has happened. But we still had votes to count, and it was important that we saw it through. And the margin really narrowed. We saw the next few hours.
It was a very much closer margin than I think anybody predicted. Even in Cox's victory speech, he made all sorts of claims that weren't even true, that have been debunked. I think he even made the claim that him and Jody Lyman were on the phone when Phil was arrested.
He was crying with her.
For 30 minutes. I think we even have the clip where Jody said, here's the voicemail that he left me, a quick little 30-second voicemail. So who knows what other lies will come out of him if during his scripted victory speech he can't even be honest.
Right. I think that was frustrating for Jody. She's a tough girl. Like she said, I was not crying to Spencer Cox that night.
That's Jody for you. So within 1 hour of the polls closing, we have issues with victory speeches, with news reports, with polling locations, with maybe 20% of the votes already in. We're now a few weeks later. We're just learning to certify the elections at certain counties. Some ballots aren't even arriving at the locations. I think that was the most recent news story is things are coming in, ballots are coming in from Las Vegas.
Right.
So what's the chain of custody on that when they're coming from out of state?
Oh, it's really concerning. That's getting national attention too, that we have these ballots that leave our state and then come back in. And the reason why it does is because that's where the sorting center is in Las Vegas. But the problem is when people took their ballot to the post office thinking it would be postmarked that day, it wasn't postmarked until it landed in Las Vegas, which could have been a couple days later. So there are a lot of people who felt like their vote should have been counted because they put it in the mail on the right time and it wasn't counted. But that's a problem with just mail-in ballots in general. I was just listening to the Board of Canvassers conversation in Utah County, and there are hundreds that have come in since the election, hundreds of ballots that because people postmarked them, they put them in the election day or right before, and they're not going to be counted. So it's just one of the inherent problems with our system.
We obviously talk about how it's such a conflict of interest having the governor oversee his own elections. Would you share with our listeners what you've seen and why they should be concerned?
Okay, that is a good question. So our system changed in 1976 where we got rid of our Secretary of State. So there are only 3 states in the United States that don't have a Secretary of State, and we're one of them. Surprise,
surprise.
Right. So and that's a big problem because where our system is, you have the governor and the lieutenant governor run on the same ticket together. And because we don't have a Secretary of State, the lieutenant governor oversees the elections. And so it's essentially the governor's race that she's overseeing. And they did say that they would have Greg Bell, who's a former lieutenant governor, come and help if there's any disputes. But I don't know what role he played because we never heard his name. We never saw him respond to any complaints or any concerns. So she essentially was running the elections. So as far as concerns, so right out the gate, I don't know if you heard, should we talk about the signature?
I actually want you to go through kind of what you, the one pager that you
Okay,
brought up.
Yeah, that's great. So we talked about Secretary of State. I think it's also important to recognize that Utah is the only red state that votes by mail. So, I mean, it's a really crazy, there's so many problems that are just inherent with our system. But
is the lieutenant governor position something that in every state is appointed, or is it elected in other states?
I'm not sure about all
Well,
that.
I guarantee we're the only red state that has lieutenant governor.
Who does the elections.
Who does the elections, right.
Uh-huh.
Right. And we're the only red state that has universal mail-in voting. I mean, and this is one of the things that's concerning me while you're, getting ready to continue, is when Cox gets up and speaks after his victory, gives his victory speech, how he says that Utah is not like other Republican states. We're a new kind of Republican.
Donald Trump is the nominee of the party nationally. He's going to win here in Utah. Again, I think, though, our Republican Party is different in Utah. Many Republicans will vote for Trump, and that's okay because that's the nominee, right? But I think what we've shown is, again, we're different.
I don't know what kind of new Republican he thinks he is and what kind of state they think we're, but when you start to look at how progressive we are with the, wanting boys and girls bathrooms, with what's going on with their elections, pushing digital ID, pushing, all, it's like, I'm not comfortable with where he's going with this new style of republicanism. Not yet on that one.
Right, and he's bringing in all these global policies into Utah, and we're seeing a lot of that. In Utah, we tend to be the pilot program for all these programs. That's how the vote by mail started, and then it's just expanded, that they bring all these things to Utah first. So the Republican Party is really under attack in Utah. So we had a system of choosing our nominees that we've had for years, and that we have a caucus convention system, which is how our country was founded, with a caucus system where you have your representatives from your neighborhood who represent you and your ideals, and they go and they vet the candidates. They spend several weeks doing that, and then they vote for them at the convention. So that's the way that we've been doing it forever. And Phil Lyman won that convention with 67.5%. So overwhelming support. So the people who had a chance to meet him and to know him wanted him and supported him at the convention. But a few years ago, our state actually intervened in our party politics. So this is kind of showing how our party's under attack. But they created a second pathway to get on the ballot, and that's the SB 54 ballot, the pathway. So that said that if a candidate could gather enough signatures, they could bypass the whole process of being vetted by delegates and by neighbors. They essentially only have to talk to a lobbyist who's going to pay the big ticket to be able to pay to get these signatures, because these are not being collected by volunteers. They're being collected by the and it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to get these signatures. They're paying between $6, $8, $10 a signature for people to get those. So they are able to get on the ballot by just collecting signatures. So that's the pathway that Spencer Cox chose, because he did not have the support of the delegates. And it's interesting because he did 4 years ago. He was the convention winner, but people have seen him and they're not happy with him. And so that's why the people in the neighborhoods don't want to vote for him anymore. And that's why he wasn't able to win it.
And just to give our audience an idea of just how much money is in this, compared to like a grassroots candidate like Lyman, you look at the Senate race with Trent Staggs, who also overwhelmingly won at convention. You had Curtis spend $13 million on his race.
$13 million.
$13 million. And he came in, I believe, second at convention, but was knocked out with also an overwhelming response. But it was his money that was able to get him the name recognition.
And most of that was climate change money.
Exactly, the lobbyists.
Right, and then when they're paying this money for the signature gatherers, part of the money is going for the gathering itself. Part of it is going to do the volunteer work, to do the grassroots, to put the signs up. So they're paying those. They don't have the volunteers. They don't have the support from the people on the ground who have seen their policies for the last 4 years. So they're paying for that to happen. So we're concerned about the big money. The second pathway, this SB 54, just puts more money in. It just lets money control our politics. And we're concerned because there's an effort to get rid of our caucus system altogether, and just to lower the bar of signatures, put us into a jungle primary. I don't know if you've heard about this. So
yeah.
It should be coming up. We heard that there may be a special session convening in August. So talk to your representatives and push back against that. They want to lower the bar so you just need a few hundred signatures. You can bypass the whole convention system and be on the ballot. Then there's no way to keep someone with wild ideas like a Bernie Sanders off the Republican Party ticket,
because they can lie.
Knows. They can lie.
And this is what they do so well in Utah, is they say exactly what people want to hear. John Curtis, perfect example. He's Democrat. He's against the wall. He says it's racist. He was pro-amnesty, but all his campaigning was the exact opposite. And because of the marketing, because of the dollars, the ignorant voter who is not informed, who's not showing, out there interviewing as a delegate, interviewing the candidates and vetting them, the low information voter who's just watching TV ends up being the person who's deciding what happens to our state and eventually country.
Right.
And so it's these, I don't care ideologically where you line up. I feel much safer having the people be in charge of it rather than big money and the powers that be running this state and it's very dangerous. It's not a party issue. It's not right.
Right. And that money comes with strings attached.
Right.
Too, and it controls
Is that
our
$17 million? You think that's just his to do with whatever and he owes nobody anything from that? Baloney.
Right.
And all the messaging comes from polling. It doesn't even mean anything at that point. So the $13 million means he's just beholden to someone. Really quick, just to back up, jungle primary, do you mind just defining that briefly for our
so
audience?
And I just talked to Kurt Bramble about that on the 4th of July. I ran into him and I said, what separates us from California? And there was no answer there, because what it essentially does is it allows anyone to get on the ballot. And so you could have 50 candidates on the ballot, and then the voter has to look at that and decide who they want. And there's no vetting that happens beforehand to make sure that they agree with the party platform or anything like that. So it's a big concern. And as we continue with this conversation with what happened with our race, we'll see the problematic it is to solely rely on these signatures.
Okay, let's go on.
So that's what as we're running our campaign, we're doing our best right there. We have, there's a private individual who is concerned with some signatures in a race in Washington County. So he does a grandma request on Dawn Ipsum's race and just wanted to be able to look at those signatures. And the answer that came back from the county attorney said, we have the discretion to be able to let you see these signatures, and we'd let you come view it. And then he got a second email back from the Washington County attorney and said, because there's an ongoing criminal investigation going, you can't have access to these packets. And so that raised concerns, because now that we know that there's an investigation going into this signature gathering company, we find out that's the same company that had gathered for Spencer Cox. And it was relevant because just in April, we had 13 people who were charged with fraud because of their signature gathering efforts in the CD2 race from last year. So this is an ongoing problem in Utah among these companies.
So there's actually 3 races that are under, I don't know if they're active lawsuits, but extreme amount of controversy. There's your race, the Cox Lyman race. You have the Ipsen race just from the signature gathering component. But then you also the recent CD2 race, the Celeste Malloy and Jenkins race, which is also a really concerning race when you're talking about Washington County, because that same Washington County attorney, isn't he also on Celeste's campaign team? And
he was in the parade wearing her T-shirt. Exactly. You've got to be concerned when you see those conflicts. And having Deidre be on Derek Brown's finance committee. When we see these things, we had Deidre endorsing candidates and paying money on Twitter saying how much she's going to pay for different candidates.
She oversees elections. So when you have the person overseeing elections being on the finance committee of certain candidates and endorsing for certain candidates, and they all happen to win, again, transparency.
Right.
Remove the conflict of interest. Remove it. That's all we want. Remove it.
And it predates the primary. It goes back to the convention with the school board race for Natalie Klein, where Cox and Deidre also made a concerted effort to oust Klein in favor of Amanda Bollinger, who wound up winning the race at convention because there was such an effort to overturn that. And eventually he wants to be in a point where he can appoint school board members.
So tell us what's going on with when you guys went to because again, if Cox is going to so to our people, when we had the flag initiative, with the initiative to protect Utah's flag, we the people, the regular people, went out and got signatures.
And Natalie was actually
involved with that.
Yeah,
right? And what happened is we go out and everyone go out and get signatures, and what does the state do? Well, now we're going to verify and make sure that these are accurate signatures.
And public record.
Checks and balance there, and it's all public record. So the governor goes out and gets signatures. Tell us what happened when you get next.
Yes, the process is so different. And so the process with an initiative is it's verified at your local county level. So they input the information onto the program called Vista. They can look, and I watched it. I watched this machine. You could see it populate from the different counties as they entered in their data. But it's different because with this one, when the candidate does it, it's all centralized by a single clerk's office. The Davis County clerk does it for the entire state. And then that information is given. So with the initiative, it's posted online. So you can go, even today, you can click on the Lieutenant Governor's webpage and you can find the names of every single person who signed the flag initiative or any other the most recent initiatives and referendums. But for a candidate, their nomination petition, that information is not available to the public. But it used to be. It used to be something that you could grandma, and you could do a grandma request and at least go view it. And that happened even as recently as a couple of weeks ago. But when we requested it, that's when it was denied. So there are other people who are able to go in. There was somebody that I know of that went to Davis County Clerk, was able to view a packet of information. It had all the signers in it. And Washington County was offered that. Utah County, I know there's multiple counties that is something, a process that we've been doing for a long time. So just so the viewers know, what happened is we are concerned because of this case in Washington County, and I'll clarify, it's not, Don Ipson ended up going through the convention route, so he didn't end up needing those signatures, but they are under investigation still, some of those signature gatherers. But because of that criminal investigation, it raised red flags for other candidates who use that same company, and especially with those lawsuits from those criminal investigations from last year. So we contacted the Lieutenant Governor's office and wanted to be able to view the nomination petition, the packets for Spencer Cox, and we did a grandma request, and it took a long time to get the information. And when it came, and they redacted about 40% of it. So there's these blank lines that just say private and withheld, with blank data lines, except for Alhava County. But we should have more information than that. If you go ahead.
Well, there's one other thing though, and I know you know this, but our audience needs to understand it. When these people go to get signatures, they use this app, and the app does not give them the private and withheld people to go ask for signatures. So when they go to your neighborhood, they know who to go talk to. They know who's already a Republican.
Right.
But we do have half our voter rolls that are marked private, which is a complete farce, which makes it so it's impossible to audit it, which that's another problem in itself. But they don't know who those people are to go ask them. So when they go and they ask for, we want to see who the signatures are, and they say, well, half of them are redacted. Well, wait a minute. How are they redacted? Your signatures gatherers did not have access to them.
Right.
Because they're marked private. So again, it's like there's so many red flags. It's out of control.
Exactly. And they were verified at 85%. So they were not just at Walmart getting people and getting a whole bunch of withheld and private signatures. They were going to targeted places to get that higher percentage rate.
So there was also, and your campaign's been doing a great job digging into some of the investigative work on some examples where they were going door to door and collecting signatures. And it was not just for Cox. It was Cox, I think Brad Wilson, and maybe even Curtis's, or a third person that they were collecting for simultaneously. And they weren't even being forthright. They weren't even telling them what they were collecting signatures for. So they were deceiving people into signing things.
Those are the reports we've heard.
Exactly, yeah. And if there's...
Well, we have a clip we can play for that too, of actual testimonies.
Yeah, and if there wasn't a problem, then they should be open with it. But as long as they're hiding things from people, we don't know except for what we're being told from other people. We're trying to find that information out, and so you're right. We're hearing reports of people. We're hearing reports of people coming to their house in warm weather when they had the Lyman signs outside, coming to sign for Spencer Cox when all of his signatures were turned in early February. So some of these things are not adding up, and we don't know behind the wall of those withheld and private signatures what truly are there actual signatures there. And I've talked to people who are withheld, and they said, how do I know that my name's not on there because I'm a withheld voter? Would that be on there? And how do we know, and these are questions we asked the Lieutenant Governor too, when there's investigations looking at Don Ipson signatures and some of those are being thrown out for fraudulent reasons, are those also being taken off of Spencer Cox's? Because like you said, they often gather signatures at the same time. We don't know. They didn't answer any of those questions. So all we're left with is questions.
So why Davis County Clerk? Was this someone that was appointed or volunteered? Why did it all go through Davis County?
My understanding is ever since SB 54, it's been contracted out to a single clerk's office. And I don't know the contract information on that. It's quite a heavy burden to do that for all of the state races. So It's quite remarkable that they were able to verify all of those in such a short amount of time too.
And especially at such a high verification rate.
Right.
Yeah.
For most of them, some of them were not as high. Brent Hatch's was not high. Jason Walton's was not high. And some of them, and it's interesting too, we found out that Spencer Cox, a lot of them turn in tens of thousands of extra signatures because they don't know how many that they'll need to be verified.
Because a lot of them get thrown out.
A lot, exactly. So he had his 28,000 were verified at a percentage rate of about 85%. So they went through about 33,000 to get those 28,000. And additionally, he only has 592 that he submitted.
As a buffer.
Not very much.
No.
So I don't know if that's why they're being so careful, like holding the information so tight, not letting us look at anything. But it's really not very many extra signatures.
Whereas for the flag referendum, they would toss a whole packet if the staple was in the wrong place or the wrong color ink or some.
Right, the date was wrong.
Exactly.
Then they out. Right. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, this is not a party issue. It's not a right versus left. This is not the American way. This is not how a republic works.
Right.
This is not, where there is no accountability. That's the bottom line. You have a governor without any checks and balances. And that is exactly what the Constitution is all about, is providing checks and balances to prevent this from happening. What else was an issue?
Right. So, I mean, and some of your viewers may have seen, we post it on our social media. So if you're not watching our social media, please come, because we're updating daily a lot of things, what's happening. There's a lot that we are trying to expose and let people know what's going on. But we put it on X and on Instagram also, as I went in to try to view the packets, because we were told them ahead of time, we want to be able to see these and to get access to it. But in the meantime, I just want to view it. And that's a normal thing to happen with a grammar request. They never responded. This is days before the election. So we didn't have any other recourse. We walked in there and then we were locked out. We were not allowed in the building. We were not allowed in the room, into the Lieutenant Governor suite, and never saw the packet. So nobody has seen Spencer Cox's signature
So again,
packets.
the question is, does Spencer Cox and the Lieutenant Governor work for the people, or do they work for themselves? And if they work for the people, we are their ruler and we are their employer. And when we say we want to see the data, we want to see the grammar requests, the data, that's the public's, that's ours.
Right.
Who are you to hide it from us? And again, it's we're shifting. We're having a shift in this state where it's not the people who rule, but the governor who rules.
And just for also our viewers that might not know, grammar requests are the public information requests that you can get technically for free if you just request it.
Uh-huh.
Are they
But not
also
in Utah?
Not in Utah? I've heard some astronomical figures, maybe not necessarily for this, but in the past when searching certain bills or legislators, astronomical figures.
Yeah, that's true. We've had people who've wanted election. Typically, it has to do with election material, but they've been told it would cost $22,000 for one request. Another request was $37,000. I mean, that's just unbelievable that they do that to people.
And you can pull text records, emails as part of these grammar requests if there is
Any
something
communication,
available.
Any
communication is ours, because they are on our dime. They're working on our dime. We are literally their employer.
Right.
I mean,
They're
it's
public
like an
servants.
employer telling the employees, "Hey, while you're working, I have access to the company emails." And yet in Utah, because the people are so asleep, because KSL and Deseret News runs cover for these guys, this type of stuff runs rampant. And we have a governor who is, again, acting complete, and a legislative body who thinks that they are the rulers and we are the ruled.
Right. So with the signatures, there's the reasons why we believe that we should see the list of signers. There's several reasons. One, I'm a candidate. Two, Phil Lyman is a representative, so there's more access that should be given to him. And our state code says that it should be, when you fill out a form to register to vote and you mark private, it says this information will be available to candidates. But that's us. I mean, so it should be out there. And then their code even has a clause in there that says that it should be in the public. If you weigh the options, that you should be able to, if it's in the public interest, you should disclose this information. So there are a lot of reasons why we should have access to it. And the most important is transparency. It's just so we can trust our elections. We've gone 4 years with this governor who spent $350,000 on billboards to tell people that our elections are secure. So every time people had a question and they said, "You're un-American for asking questions," they push back, and then they put more propaganda in front of you and say everything's secure, don't ask questions. So we're at a point right now, they have an opportunity to show some transparency and to restore some trust in the elections, and we'll see if they step up. Right now they've flat out denied every single request so far with this election cycle. It's very concerning.
So what's the deal with the cast vote records? What's that issue?
Yeah, the cast vote records. So if you think about in a national election, so we're watching late at night and you see the map and they say, we have this county is in, we're expecting this county, this one usually leans left, this one was likely to come with this vote, and we're watching that data. That's the cast vote records. That's what we're asking for in Utah, and we don't have that in Utah. We don't. It's sealed up. In the past, it was on the website. You could go to some of the individual counties and you could see these are the votes that are coming in by precinct. It's going for this candidate, or this came in at this time, or this. So that information used to be public, and then it used to be something that they could do a grammar request on. Well, this time on July 2nd, we did a grammar request to all 29 counties asking for those important election returns, and it has no individual information on it. So no private information that people should be concerned about. It's just a record of the votes and where it's coming in from. When we asked for that on July 2nd, we did a grammar request to everyone. The following day on July 3rd, Deidre Henderson, our lieutenant governor, sent a letter to all the clerks and said, don't give this information out. This is not available to be seen. So it's just another one of those big slap in the face. Like, why can't the public have access to, this is our information. Why can't we have information?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure our listeners and viewers at this point can see why we're concerned. And the sad thing is, I think if most Utahns, I don't care what party, knew this was going on, they'd be appalled. The problem is people don't know. And that's why I encourage you guys to share this stuff.
Right. So so we're concerned. So on the following, so there was a letter. This is what she said: the cast vote records, tabulator information, ballot images, tabulator tapes, backup project databases, and other election materials are not public records and are not subject to GRAMA. So then our question is, if they're not public records, then what are they? Because this is public information and it should be accessible to the public. And before 2020, all of this was information that we had. But ever since then, we've just seen a big shift in our elections, big lack of transparency.
Yeah, complete stonewalling. So let's move on to the cure reports. I think that's actually next on your list as well. So the clerks are now refusing to send out the cure reports. So the cure reports that's for ballots that have been received that maybe don't match signatures?
That's right, yeah. So there's basically 3 things of information that we asked for, and we were denied all 3 of them. So the cure, and all of them shifted during the middle of the election, which is where access was given at the first, and then a couple days later it was denied. So cure list is exactly another one of those. So we said, and this is typical. So a couple of years ago, I was just a private citizen as a precinct chair, and I was given by our county clerk some of the access to some of the cure lists. Those are people who, like you said, their signatures don't match. So their vote will not be counted unless they can come to the county clerks by a certain time, show them their ID, and verify that this is actually their ballot. And so often candidates help with that. Often the public helps with that. It's a race against the clock to notify these people. And so it's a big community effort to make sure that everybody's vote is counted. And so this year we did a request to all 29 counties again and said, we would like to see your cure list so that we could help with this process and be aware of it. We were given the cure list from Salt Lake County, from Utah County, I believe Box Elder and Emory County. And then when we talked to Iron County, they said, we'll give it to you tomorrow or this afternoon or tomorrow. I can't remember which. But he said, let me just reach out real quick and make sure that Lieutenant Governor is okay with this. Then we get an email back and it says, we don't give this information out. And then every other request was denied. And it became a really big issue for Colby Jenkins. And because he was running in CD2, and those were the counties that affected his race, and he was only about 20 votes away from triggering an automatic recount. So he wanted to be able to see this cure list, because if people's votes are not being counted, they should know. And he wanted to help with that effort. He was denied. He took it to court Monday morning, and then he was denied by a Cox-appointed judge. Denied it.
Again, Cox-appointed judge denied it.
And just so people understand how slim the margins here, we're talking about a difference of maybe 300 votes, whereas I think 270 would trigger the recount.
Right.
So
very close.
That, if you ever say,
and the last thing they want is a recount, because if there's a recount, they can expose all this stuff.
Right. And
right.
If you ever think, oh, well, I'm not going to vote, my vote doesn't matter, I can't get there today, just know that it's make or break for races like this, where there is a difference of maybe 20 votes that could have swayed the whole election. Although I'm sure if we opened up Pandora's box here, it might expose a lot more than just those 20 votes.
Right. If only we could see in that Pandora's box.
Exactly.
Right.
What was next? So you said there was 3 things. There was the curing of the ballots. Mm-hmm. There was the grammar requests, or what was
the whole nomination petition. So the signatures that even made us have a primary election. That's why that's so critical, because if he didn't get the signatures, then we didn't need to go through that whole contest for the primary election. And just so people know, we have some serious concerns about this SB 54, and it has been fought before. I think it may be fought. We may bring a suit about it. We're looking closely at that, because we feel that violates our right of association as a party to make the own rules for our party. So right now, Phil Lyman was 67%. We were the nominees for the party, but yet we had to win twice to be able to get to the election in November.
Because the Republican Constitution says if you get over 60%, you shall be the nominee.
Right. But then because
meaning you go on, you are there in November. But because our state reps passed a law that said, no, we're going to give people a way to go around that, so that people who are complete Democrats or people who do not to stop the grassroots, so people who are aligned with their agenda, they can get them in another route. As long as they put the money in, boom, and they're in.
Right.
And state
It's
law,
baloney. It's got to stop.
And state law trumps party law,
Which is wrong. That is unconstitutional.
we think there's
state law has no business interfering with a private business, telling them how they're going to choose the nominee. That is not constitutional. What constitutional authority does the state have to interfere with how the Republican Party chooses its nominees? They have none.
Right. I think you're absolutely right. I think it is a violation or a right of association, a constitutional issue, and I think it's really important. So we are at a unique place right now. So Phil and I, we both ran because we care about Utah and we know the problems that are out there and we want to fix it. And so I've actually never run for office before. I've been involved at the grassroots level. I've been involved helping with elections and those
you're
things.
A saint.
So I know those things, but we jumped into this because we wanted to make things better. So regardless of whether any of these efforts overturn the election or change the outcome, we want to make things better and we want to expose it as we go along. And it's important that we do that. And we feel like we have standing right now with this criminal investigation going on in Washington County. It makes the urgency of seeing these signatures even more relevant. With Phil being a representative, with us we were the party nominees. There's a lot of reasons why we are the people to do this now. And when you look at it, I always am thinking about what arrows. I mean, when I ran, I thought, what arrows are they going to shoot at me? You have to look in your past, like, what are they going to do? And I thought, I'm pretty squeaky clean. But I think what they're going to do, right now, we have the law on our side. We have the public interest on our side for transparency. The one thing that they can do is try to discredit us. And we're not going to let that stick. So they'll do anything they can. We've seen that on the national level. But we want people to know that we are doing this because we care about Utah and we want to make things better. And we have some real problems out there and we've got to make changes now.
Yeah, and it's very frustrating because this is so important, what's happening now, what you're exposing now, because we've all known about these issues for a long time, which is why Phil and Steve Christiansen have been trying to clean up our elections, why we're rated at the bottom of the country for election integrity. But the problem is, while most of the country or a state should be opening their eyes and seeing what you're saying, you have KSL and Deseret News saying, "Oh, these guys are poor losers, right. Election deniers. Don't listen to them. They're just being poor losers, sour grapes." And in reality, this is something that's extremely important. And it's very important that you guys win it because you guys can change things. But nothing will change until people wake up and realize the depth of corruption in this state.
Right. Right. And if you're watching the media and you're watching their coverage of it, watch and see what are they talking about anything tangible? Are they talking about the real issues, or are they just trying to point fingers at us? And that's all they can do. That's all they can do is to try to discredit us, and it's not working because people see.
Well, it's working for the masses. The masses are listening. Look, if I'm the masses, I'm driving to work because I care about what's going on in this country. I'm listening to KSL, and I'm hearing them, slam on you guys, sore losers, and the election deniers. I don't know any different. I'm not hearing this. I'm not hearing this podcast. How am I not buying into that?
Yeah, well,
knowledge is power, and without knowledge, you cannot make a decision. They're not hearing this.
They've got to. So people have to tell their neighbors, do we want a system that the governor controls everything? I mean, he is like a king right now at this point, like what they're able to do and all these no bid contracts that they did during COVID time and trying to appoint attorney general, secretary, the school board and auditor and treasurer. There's all this effort of centralizing our elections. All of this power is being pulled in to the top right now. And then we're seeing this even now at the elections where they control everything. Like you can't have any access. So people need to know that's the story. That's the real story here is what we're up against. And we have to push back right now or else this is the time to push back
Absolutely.
And expose this.
So honestly, this has been powerful. It's been, eye-opening for me. And I appreciate you coming in to share this information with me and with our listeners. As we wrap up, what other information or call to action do you have for our listeners?
Thank you. That's great. We have things coming up because we've been denied these grammar requests, but we're not just going to sit sit back. We've appealed them. So we have an appeal coming up on July 18th for the State Records Committee, and that's to be able to get access to the Ipsen signature list so that we can see which ones are under investigation. So we encourage people to come. That's in Taylorsville. You'll find information on our social media. So
what's your social media?
We've got Lyman is on Phil Lyman on Twitter, on X, and Phil Lyman for governor, and mine is Natalie for Utah, LG. And then on Instagram, I'm Lyman there's Lyman for Utah, Natalie for Utah on Instagram. So we update often on there. So there's a lot of information. Keep watching it because we're still in this. Like we have an important role in this right now in this fight. So please come on July 18th. On Thursday to the State Records Committee. It's at Taylorsville. So we'd love to have support up there. Let people know that this is important to us, that you want to be able to have access to these records, that we need to have more transparency. And then we've also filed a lawsuit, and that is to be able to have access to the list that Spencer Cox used to get on the primary. And that's really important that we know what's behind those signatures, behind all those blank lines. The public needs to know. So keep watching as we update you on that, what the progress with that.
Awesome.
Will there be a lawsuit for what there is now standing for with it being unprecedented to have more than 60% at convention for Phil to make it through? Is there a lawsuit planned for that?
We are considering one on the SB 54 challenge, and that would be related to that because we were the convention winners, but now because of the state's intervention, we've had to have the second path. So there's a very good legal argument on that is a violation of our constitutional right as a party.
So for our viewers right now, they're thinking to themselves, maybe their name might be on a cure list. Maybe they don't know if their vote was counted. Will someone reach out to them, or is there something they can do proactively to make sure their vote was counted?
Cure list, probably not, because most of them ended on Monday at 5 p.m. That you could see. Well, it depends on when the board of canvassers are, but you could reach out to your county and find out. I mean, it's really sad. We heard of a missionary that the mom just got a letter. It said that his signature didn't match. I mean, a lot of these kids haven't even learned cursive in school, and their signatures are changing all the time. So he wasn't able to correct it because he's not close by. So that's just a problem with our mail-in voting system. So I would suggest that people pay attention to our elections. We don't have to have it this way. We can put pressure on the legislature to clean things up. It's in the national news right now. Elon Musk is tweeting about the problems with mail-in voting. We know that there are a lot of problems for mail-in voting and potential problems. So put pressure on your legislatures to get a cleaner system. That would go a long way too.
Well, baby, what do you think?
I think Casey actually posted this on Twitter. I think it was today, and I think it's a good way to just sum everything up that we spoke about today. So
Casey Gale.
Yeah, shout out to Casey. He's also a big part of the Lyman campaign and a social media warrior. So I'll just reiterate what he said. Is there more corruption in Utah's 24 gubernatorial primary than there was in Arizona's 22 gubernatorial general election with Carrie Lake, who, side note, Deidre is best friends with Katie Hobbs. So coincidence? Who knows?
Interesting.
So Deidre Henderson and Spencer Cox oversaw their own election. Here's part of the case. When you oversee your own election, when you oversee your running mates' signatures, when you refuse to release the cast vote records, when you deny grammar requests, when clerks refuse to send out cure reports, when you refuse to release the names of those signing a candidate nomination petition, when you employ those on the board of canvassers, when you appoint the judges, when the media runs interference. It's a recipe for unchecked and unbalanced tyranny.
Well said, Alexia and Casey. We are in a time when the Constitution is hanging by a thread. You look nationally what's going on. Our country has been taken over at the highest levels, the FBI, the DOJ. They've replaced the leadership in the military with woke, people who are loyal to this new party that's running. New party, new regime, whatever you want to call it. They've destroyed our military. They've destroyed our dollar. They turned off our ability to be energy dependent. Our country is on the fringe, on the literally hanging by a thread. You've got certain states standing up and fighting. Florida, South Dakota, Kristi Noem, Arkansas. You have certain governors who are pushing back against the machine. Meanwhile, in Utah, you have Governor Cox saying that we're not like other Republicans, that, we are the Romney, we are the Curtis, we are the, look what is happening to our state. Look at our reps. And, this should terrify people because, the whole message is, we can do so little about D.C., but you have so much power over your backyard. And if there's one fight that matters right now, it is this, because if we cannot control our ability to elect if we don't have control of our elections, what do we have? We're a tyranny. And when we have a governor who oversees his own elections, when you go through everything we just talked about, I mean, you get it. You've seen this. So again, this is the establishment versus the people. This is the elite media. Like everywhere in the world, CNN and Fox, it is the same thing in Utah. You have KSL and Deseret News and the Trib all pushing a narrative versus the regular people like us versus, the people. Nobody's coming to save us. No one's coming to save you. If we are going to get this country back, it starts with getting our state back, and that starts with you standing up and fighting this fight. And there is nothing that tyranny fears more than the spoken truth. That is why the World Economic Forum, I'll put it in the article here. I'm going to put it here again. I put it in the last video because you need to be aware. The biggest threat that they say that we have in this world ahead of war, and we are on the verge of World War III, ahead of economic disaster, which we are on the verge of that. The biggest threat, according to these tyrants, is misinformation. They fear you. They fear this. They can control KSL. They cannot control this. They cannot control you. Your kid's future depends on you standing up and talking to your neighbors, having the uncomfortable conversations. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable. Share the post and say, hey, what do you think of this? You don't even have to say your opinion. Do you think this is as validity? Do you think the Cox should be in charge of elections? Ask the question. Learn to be tactful. You don't have to go and be a bulldog and come across, like a crazy conspiracy. Just say, what do you think about this? Do you think there's anything funny here? Get this information out, because that is how we win. Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, one man who tells the truth can bring down a tyranny. We have a tyranny growing in our backyard, and it is your responsibility. It's my responsibility. It is our responsibility to stand up and fight it. They fear us. They'll turn off our stations. We will keep fighting, and we need you to do the same. So, God bless you guys. I love our people. We see you guys every now and then. Every now and then people come up and introduce us and say they're following us. And, we love you guys. We appreciate you guys. Thank you for your support. Thank you for watching. And every time we run into you guys, it just makes us so happy meeting you guys. And that's why I have hope. We have the most incredible people in this state. And yes, this is one of the most corrupt states. But I'm going to tell you, where there's most corruption, there's the most light. Where there's most darkness, it is always duality. And the army is here, and you are that army, and it is time for us to stand up and fight. So God bless you guys. God bless America, and God bless this state of Utah. We need it. Jeez. Take care.